Okay, I've got 12:02. Jeremy, are you ready to get started?
I am, sir.
Okay, April and Gord, can you all hear us okay? Patrick, I know you're in the office next door to me, so I'm going to assume you can at least hear one side of the conversation well.
Nope, we can hear you and see you.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for taking some time this afternoon to for a little discussion on how we go about building parts physical inventory integrity within your parts department. My name is Kent Ely. I function with KEA Advisors as controller, as well as do some fixed operations advising for the company. I'm joined today by Jeremy Smallwood, who's been with us now for about 4 months, but has a much longer history in the parts department than I've got. So Jeremy, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll get this started.
You got it. Thank you. Again, as Kim mentioned, my name is Jeremy Smallwood. I've been doing parts for 33 and a half years now. It's what I do. I enjoy it. I love diving into the parts department. There are so many things that are just like math equations. It's a problem that needs to be solved. And it's something I love to do, and I look forward to doing it, and looking forward to getting into this discussion today.
Okay. So we've had a couple more folks join us. We've got a small group today, it looks like. So by all means, if at any point in time you've got questions while we're on the slide, just open up your mics and feel free to chime in with those questions at that time. For sure, we'll have time for questions at the end of this session, but with that, I'll turn it to Jeremy and let him get started here.
All right, thanks, Kent. If you could, let's flip to that first slide there. There we go. So learning objectives for the webinar today. The first one, we need to determine why this is needed. And depending on your department or your facility, there may be different whys. And Kent's going to go more into that in the next slide. But today we're also going to identify 12 basic steps that we can use to improve the inventory integrity. These are again, they're basic. They're stuff that we as a manager should be doing every day. Looking at these things and going over them. And then we need to understand, once we look at these 12, we need to understand the actions that are needed in order to put these things in place, these processes and procedures, and how we go about doing them. So that's what we're going to be learning today. And Ken, if you can go to the next slide, and I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, I will. And before I jump to the next slide, I think maybe one thing that we missed as we put this together is the first thing we need to understand is what is inventory integrity. And when we talk about inventory integrity, what we mean there is that it's honest and it's reliable, and truly what you see is what you get, whether it's standing in front of the bin, looking at a part number and realizing that the quantities are correct there, or if you're sitting at your desk reviewing a suggested stock order, that those numbers, that the basis for that part number being suggested for that stock order are correct in your system, so that you don't have to go back and double check the bin before you place that order, or when your counter folks are on the phone with a customer, they don't have to run back and check the bin to make sure that we actually have it on hand. So that actually covers a lot of the first point on the why, right? Number one, we want to improve that accuracy between the system and what is shown on the shelf or on on order. When we talk about the accuracy, the benchmark that we shoot for there is 98%. So that we know that if we went back and counted 100 different part numbers and then came back and sat down and compared to what the DMS system showed, we would want 98 out of those 100 part numbers to be spot on in terms of count. Several reasons for this. We've already talked about the stock orders and not having to double check things there. You know, we've got a lot of money invested in systems within our dealerships to help us manage our inventories. But yet they're only as good as the data that's within them. So we need to make sure that data is correct. We also want to build the confidence of our staff that what the system says is correct, so that they can assure that customer that's on the phone that we really do have that part. The next piece of the why talks about minimizing the variance between our physical and our general ledger inventory values. Certainly we have we have a fixed amount of cash that we can invest into our inventories. And we need to make sure that what we say in parts we have is what accounting says that we have. And that there's no surprises when we get to that year-end physical inventory. And finally, we want to be able to improve our first-time fill rates and our customer satisfaction. As we look at it from the back counter perspective, we want to be able to keep our technicians in their bay working on trucks. And as we look at it over the front counter or our other wholesale customers out there, the longer that they can keep their techs in their own bays, the better off they're going to be. And that's going to help to bring repeat business back to us. Jeremy, what did I miss there? Anything?
Yeah, I think you covered it very well there.
Okay. So Jeremy talked about 12 steps to improve parts inventory integrity, and I'm going to let him start off with the first one here on the left-hand side.
So when we're going to go through these 12 steps, everybody is on a different DMS. And these 12 steps, it doesn't matter what DMS you're on, they all are the same. Be pulled a little different, the way to get there may be a little different, but these 12 steps are going to be whichever DMS you're on, it's going to apply to those. And that first one, the no bin with quantity on hand. Now, why could this be a problem with accurate inventory? Well, if you've got parts in stock that don't have a bin location, where are they? Where are those parts located? Does the parts manager have a pile of parts in his office that he knows about? Is your shipping and receiving guy been working here for 20, 25 years and he knows exactly where he puts the parts? That can't happen in a parts department. Every part that is in your inventory needs to have a specific bin location so that it's able to be found. Number one, just for, again, as Kent talked to earlier, the accuracy of being able to go to the shelf and pull the part when it's needed. To have that tech come up and ask for a part and you be able to go right to that shelf and pull that part. That part has to be located in your inventory. That's one of the first basic steps that we have to take to ensure that our inventory is accurate and correct, is making sure that location is in there as soon as the part is received and put onto our shelf.
Jeremy, before I go to the next one, I'm going to throw a question at you. What about, I know some dealers out there will have a bin that is automatically assigned to parts that are added to the system. It might be something along the lines of no loc or NS or special order. what do we do to ensure that we can put our hands on those parts?
That's a great question. So a lot of dealers do that, and there is a good reason for doing that, because you want high visibility to the special order parts or to those new parts that are coming into your stock that you've never had set up before. So if you're managing it properly and you're looking at those parts and you know about that, so what that'll do is if you order a special order, and we'll get more into special orders a little bit later with the process, but if you order a special order part into your inventory, the thought is that that part is immediately going to be sold and immediately go out. So you may have a bin such as no loc or special order or whatever you designate that to be, because if something happens where that part does not go to the customer cancels the order or he returns that part, you want that to be highly visible. And if you have a special bin set up for that, hey, this part's in no loc. I've got one part in no loc. Why? And now you can go manage that exception and find out why that part is in. That would be the only reason to have those types of bins set up, is to monitor that and to keep track of that.
Our second step that we talk about here on the right is no cost with quantity on hand. So very similar to those parts with that don't have a bin assigned to those. Each part that we have on hand needs to have a cost associated with it, for two reasons. Number one, as we spoke about on the previous slide, making sure that our two inventory values will reconcile with each other. We need that information to make sure that they'll reconcile. But in addition to that, if we have that part on hand and we've got a customer that wants to buy that part, we want to make it as easy on our counter folks as we can to get parts sold. Let's have the cost loaded into the system and make it easy for the customer to buy, make it easy for us to sell parts and move on to the next piece.
All right. And then the next thing is the multiple parts. So this can actually be in two different categories. You could have multiple parts, and you could also have parts that are in multiple sources. So I'll take the multiple sources first, and I'll just use Bendix as an example. So if you're running your inventory extremely tight and you know that you order Bendix normally direct ship, but sometimes you order Bendix from your distributor, whether it be Peterbilt, Freightliner, Navistar. So you know that sometimes it's direct ship, sometimes it's ordered through them. You may purposely set that part number up under two different sources, because Bendix, for an example, sometimes it's cheaper to buy directly from the distributor, and sometimes it's cheaper to buy from direct ship. So you may play that game and order it purposely under different sources in order to get the best deal at the time. And that's okay, as long as you're managing it and you know, your managers know, your parts people know, you clearly mark the parts, that's fine. The problem comes into when you have multiple sources or multiple part numbers, and the reason why is you use 107794. You could have that ordered under two different sources, but the reason it's under two different sources is because counter guy A orders it from Bendix, counter guy B orders it from the distributor, and counter guy C orders it from Napa. If that's the case, now you've got this part, who knows which one's on the shelf, who knows what source it's in. But even worse is when you have multiple parts, a lot of times you'll have that part in the inventory. A guy will call up and need that part, and maybe your parts guy says, I don't have that part. We don't have any. But yet in reality, you've got 4 on the shelf because you set it up with the wrong prefix or suffix. And again, using Bendix, it could be a BX, it could be a BW, it can be an OR at the end, it could be a B1 at the end. So how are you managing your parts? And we just did an engagement recently where everybody in the parts department basically had free will to order that part wherever they wanted to order it from. So we actually had a part number that was on the shelf 3 different ways because of that, because they were ordering it from 3 different places. So when you're talking about inventory and inventory accuracy, this is something that we look at. Take that base part number and search those base part numbers to see if there's any multiple parts or if there's any source code variations. Because again, there could be on purpose because you're ordering the way you want to order it. But the majority of the time when you have multiple parts, it is because of one of those errors. Somebody used the wrong source code or somebody ordered it from the wrong vendor that they should not have, and it's set up with a wrong prefix or a wrong suffix on it.
Okay. The next item we've got up there is stockouts. And so stockouts, what we're looking at is those part numbers that have met stocking criteria, but for some reason, we don't have any on hand. And there's obviously a variety of reasons why we may not have those on hand. Certainly in today's environment with supply chain issues, vendor back orders, that can take up a lot of those parts in there. But sometimes it's because with vendor managed inventories, sometimes things get missed. It may not meet the vendor managed inventories criteria for stocking, yet it meets our criteria within the DMS system. And so we want to make sure that those pieces, if we feel that they are truly a stocking part, that those parts are on our shelves. And so it's not just a matter of reviewing those stockouts and seeing, okay, yeah, we've got parts that are stocked out, but then what do we do with that information? If it's a vendor managed part, perhaps it means that we need to get in touch with our representative from that system, the LPAs, the RIMs, RIM Pro, DIA, whoever that may be, and find out why that part's not being stocked. It may be if it's a stock class that we're managing, it may be that we need to review how often we're doing stock orders. Maybe we're not doing them often enough, and so we need to build a stock order calendar that fits the way that we do business currently. And then we need to follow up and stick with that calendar. It's not enough just to say we're going to do it. We actually have to follow through on doing what we say we're going to do. Jeremy?
Right. And falling in line with those stockouts, we have our open purchase orders. And the reason these could affect your inventory is if a part is on an open purchase order, it will not reorder. So your distributors' inventory systems, whether it be the RIM Pro, the DIAs, if that part's already on order, if it's on a PO, it's not going to reorder. So we have to make sure that as managers, we're going through our open purchase orders and reviewing them. Now, aside from critical order parts, which we can't affect, that's that issue that we're just never going to overcome. There's always going to be a critical order part, but our purchase orders, we should never have purchase orders older than 30 days old. With our normal order cycles, the way we do things, especially if you get purchase orders that start going out, 6, 7, 8 months, and heaven forbid, if you're out a year, 2 years with open purchase orders. Have you ever had your parts guys come up and get mad at you because we keep running out of this part? We don't have it on the shelf. Well, a good chance it's on an open purchase order. And that leads to the stock outs when it's on an open purchase order. You need to review it on a daily basis to double check and make sure that you don't have these that are sitting out there. One thing that happens is, and I'm sure you've all seen this, where a stock order will actually beat an emergency order in. So you could have 5 emergency orders for this part, but you get a stock order and it fills 10. So now you've got 10 parts on the shelf, but you've still got 5 emergency orders that are waiting for these parts. So that's another reason to make sure you're reviewing your open purchase orders and going through them and just verifying that the parts didn't come in. Not only are you making sure that the parts are still on order, you're making sure that they haven't crossed paths and come in at the same time. So those are very important to look at on a daily basis also.
The next item is one that I like a lot, and that's lost sales review and analysis. There are differing opinions on what to do with lost sales, and I respect that. And all I can say to that is to be consistent with how you apply lost sales information within your department. And so by being consistent, number one, we know that for a part number to show up in your inventory management system, the first thing that happens is somebody has to enter that part number into the system. We have to have some kind of demand request for that part. And so a customer's, okay, they've requested the part. Now what? They didn't order it because we didn't have it. What do we do with that? If we never record a lost sale on that piece, because the customer didn't buy it, then how's our system or the vendor managed system going to know to suggest that part for us in the future? We're already behind the 8 ball there. So understand why we need to do lost sales. Help your counter folks to understand why lost sales are important. It's not that we're trying to measure them and say they're doing a bad job by recording lost sales. It's actually quite the opposite. We should pat them on the back for recording lost sales, because now we understand a little bit more what our customers are looking for. And so share with them why we do it, work with them to help create your department's definition of what a lost sale is. And then review these things on a daily basis if you can, and review it with your counter people. Understand why they recorded a lost sale on a particular part number. Understand why they recorded a quantity of 100 lost sales on a particular part number. Maybe it's a legitimate thing that they really did lose 100, or maybe they don't understand how the system works. And so work with them, coach them. And what you will see is over time, the fill rates for your inventory will increase, because you now have a better idea of what your department's true demand is. Jeremy, anything else you'd like to add on lost sales?
Just the importance of them. There's a lot of times when parts people think that they're going to inflate their inventory by doing a lost sale, or they think that, well, he walked out, so it's not important. But when you're talking about your inventory tracks the demands for a part. So if you're set up on a 3 hits and 12-month system, well, you may have only sold that part once, but you may have had 6 different customers come in and ask for that part and you didn't have it and you couldn't sell it. So you missed those 6 hits. Where if you'd have been counting those lost sales, that part would have been in your inventory and you'd have been able to hand it to the customer and make the money.
Before we move on to the next slide, any questions from folks here? All right. So the next piece is the first one we want to talk about is open counter tickets and repair orders. Again, this one from where I sit, a lot of where that focuses is as we're doing that reconciliation between the two inventories, and it's helping us to understand, do those two values, do they match up, or are we way off between accounting and our physical inventory? It's also important that we make sure that everything that truly is sold to a customer and that is on our inventory or is coming out of our inventory, that it is on those tickets, that it's not, maybe we've got a part that just came in, but we haven't added it to the ticket yet. Or the customer's just called and said, I want this. And so we've set it next to the an open invoice to add to it. Jeremy, you've been in this business a lot longer than I have and have seen it more up close and personal. I know this can be an issue, so I'll let you take it on a little bit more.
Oh, it definitely can, especially if anybody walks out and just takes a look at their RO shelves, look at all the shop jobs with repair orders that are open with parts that are on them. And again, this is with inventory integrity. Where are those parts at? They're on an open ticket. Okay, great. Were they pulled? Were they still on the shelf? Worse yet, were they given to the customer or the tech, but that wasn't closed out? So open tickets and repair orders are an extreme issue is if the processes are not followed. There should be a clear process when a ticket's done. It's given either to a warehouse person, a picker, somebody to go pull those parts and to segregate them on an order shelf or for delivery or on an RO shelf to the customer. It's so important. And again, it's all about inventory integrity for the next guy who needs that part and comes back and grabs it off the shelf. And all of a sudden, wait a minute, we don't show any in stock. Well, because it's already on an open ticket and it hasn't been pulled yet. So again, one of the 12 steps, but an important one in inventory integrity.
I guess another thing that just came to my mind here is, and while we're not talking about obsolescence, certainly those open counter tickets that maybe the customer doesn't want anymore, we can, while we've still got the opportunity, let's get those parts returned if the customer doesn't want them anymore. So,
right. And along with that too, when those parts are on that ticket or on the RO, they have been pulled from your inventory. So it is going to generate the fact that you're out of those parts and you need them. So are you creating a double demand? Did the customer really need those parts, or are those parts going to go back on the shelf? So when you have an open ticket or a repair order, those parts need to be pulled, segregated, and billed out.
I guess that leads right to your next point too, with the special
Yes.
order process.
And this is my favorite one, because this is one almost every that I've ever been involved with in some way, shape, or form. This has been an issue. Most dealers will all say, yeah, we have a special order process. Well, how does that involve inventory integrity? Well, if you look every dealer on the bottom of their invoice, somewhere in the finest print you could ever possibly imagine, there's some brief description of their special order process, whether it be on electrical parts, non-stock parts, special order parts, cores, core returns. There's some type of process. But now go ask the parts manager, go ask the counter guy, go ask your outside salesperson, go ask your warehouse person what that process is. And I would bet that almost every one of those people gives you some type of different answer as to what the process is. The special order process is so important. It needs to be clearly marked on your invoices, on your ROs. There also needs to be signage posted at your front counter and at your back counter, customer facing and visible. And the reason why is this is one of the things that creates obsolescence and everything else, the special orders. You know, and I'll give an example. You know, an engine wiring harness. It's an electrical part. Almost every engine wiring harness is custom built, made to order, so they're non-returnable. So your counter guy orders a $2,000 engine wiring harness, pays $250 freight to get it in, comes in, customer says, "Oh, I don't need it now. We fixed it. It was just a broken wire." Or he gets and says, "Hey, one of the plugs is wrong. Don't worry about it. We're going to fix it ourselves." Where does that harness go? Normally, for parts people, it goes right back in your inventory. There's no processes being followed as to what do you do when that part comes back. Well, if you followed the process from the beginning, you should have collected cash for that special order non-returnable electrical part. And you should have collected the freight for it up front so that that part was paid for. So now when the customer comes back to return that part, if you follow the process and you've done what you're supposed to do, you would have informed that customer of these things before he even purchased that part. So now when he brings it back, that conversation's easy to have because not only did you have the conversation, you've got signage posted clearly at your counter, you've got it clearly on your invoice what your terms are, and now the conversation is a lot easier than you just ordering a part for the guy and him bringing it back and you trying to tell him, "Hey, sorry, you can't return this." Because now you're going to have an angry customer. Now it's going to snowball, get the manager involved. But again, more importantly, from not following the processes, it's going to mess up your inventory. Because now, what are you going to do with that $2,000 wiring harness and the $250 freight that you have? You're going to stick it on the shelf. And then what are you going to do 12 months from now? 24 months from now? There's nothing you can do. So you've got $2,000 worth of dead inventory sitting on your shelf, and you've already eaten $250 worth of freight in your department. So whether you take the hit up front or whether you take the hit 12 to 24 months from now, you're still going to take that $2,000 hit for that special order harness.
Jeremy, I think you just froze up on us. So I'll move ahead to the receiving history review, and hopefully you'll be back shortly. So the receiving history
And
review is
your
exactly.
inventory.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, you froze up.
No, go ahead.
No, I don't think we got everything that you were talking about for the special order process. So
Oh, did I drop out?
you did. You did.
Oh, no.
Probably
right,
the
so-
last 15 seconds of what you were talking about.
Okay. So the last, I was just reiterating the fact that every department needs to make sure that those special order processes are in place. And more importantly, they need to make sure that they're followed and that everybody is clear and understands what that process is. Because those special orders, those cores, those returns can affect your inventory so quickly in such a high dollar volume that it's imperative that this order process is in place and held accountable to the process.
Receiving history review is just what it says it is. And this is just a confirmation to make sure that that what we say that we received into the system matches up with the packing list or the invoice that we received from our supplier. Again, its purpose is to help us ensure that that our inventory values align with each other, but also to help the system make good suggestions for stock orders, whether it's your system for stock ordering or a vendor managed system.
And then moving into the credit memos and returns, much like the special orders, when credits are issued or credits come back or parts come back or cores come back, what is the process? You know, if a customer returns a core or your driver picks up a core or a credit, what do they do with that part? Where does it go? Does it part go back into inventory and a credit slip come up to your counter guy? Does that core go into the core bin and a core slip come up to your counter guy? What is the process? And again, the way this could affect your inventory is obviously one thing that happens quite often, and I'm sure you've seen this. A customer will return a core, but our driver, our warehouse person, our counter guy grabs a box and the box is nice and clean and, oh, customer returned a part. So they put it back on the shelf, give customer credit. 2 days later, another counter guy goes to open the box and realizes, oh, this is a core, this is not a new part. So what is the process and how do you work the process? And do you have a return shelf so that you can monitor what's coming back? You know, during the day, your frontline counter guys, any credits that they do, are those credits being verified? That, you know, hey, customer brought back these 4 parts. Okay, did somebody check them and make sure all 4 parts being returned, are they sellable? Are they returnable? Are they in good condition? You know, the cores, are the cores returnable? Are they rusty? Was it a brake caliper that caught on fire and it's non-returnable because it has burn damage? These are things, again, that the process and procedures need to be followed or it could affect your inventory greatly.
The next one we've got on here is vendor managed inventory reports. And just like the DMS systems, where different versions of reports are available, with the different vendor managed inventories, different reports are available there. But what we're talking about here, typically they have a suite of exception reports that are available to you. They'll be sent out either on a weekly basis, or sometimes you'll see some of these items on a monthly basis. And it helps you to understand some of those items that we've talked about earlier, perhaps like open orders that are still there in the system. Maybe it's legitimate, maybe it's not, but their system is still showing that perhaps that we've got these part numbers on order. Another one that I know sticks out in my mind is the per job quantities. You know, it helps you to understand how the system is looking at resupplying you, and maybe your DMS has a per job of, we'll say 6, you know, if we're talking injectors, but perhaps we're only selling them in quantities of 1 or 2, and so we end up getting overstocked because of a per job situation. Pay close attention to those vendor managed inventory reports. They'll help you to keep your inventory cleaner. They will help it to turn faster, And certainly if you don't understand what those reports are, your OE has a representative that will help you to understand how to read those reports and what to do with them.
And then the last of the 12 we're going to talk about today is cycle counts or perpetual inventory. And cycle counts, a yearly inventory, you need to cycle count the guide. You need to cycle count your inventory at least 4 times a year in order to not have a physical inventory every year. And the reasons for doing this are obvious. You want to keep your inventory accurate. You want to make sure that your inventory integrity is of utmost importance. And the cycle counts, a lot of times, you know, when you think about that, when you think about the fact that I have to cycle count my entire inventory 4 times a year, a little bit of panic or anxiety starts to set in because it seems overwhelming. But when you start to run the reports and realize it's only a set amount of parts or a set bin or a set bin location, it really is pretty easy to get the cycle counts done on a daily basis. And again, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute or two here. But the one thing you need to realize is, as parts managers, you don't have to do everything yourself. You know, you as a parts manager don't have to stop selling and stop managing and stop doing everything that you do on a daily basis and take 3 hours and go do cycle counts every day. You can split these up and hand them out and have other people help you. The one thing I will advise, you know, hopefully this never happens, but if you do have a dishonest person that works for you, or if you have somebody who, you know, maybe they're not dishonest, but maybe they're just afraid to tell you about how bad their cycle counts really are, you want some type of checks and balances with your cycle count. I'll use the analogy of, you don't want the fox watching the hen house. So whoever's doing your cycle counts, make sure that there's some type of checks or balances, even if it's just to spot check them occasionally to make sure that their counts are accurate and they are providing solid information. Because again, it's your inventory. It's an integral part of what you do on a daily basis, and it has to be accurate.
Jeremy talked about this just a minute ago. How do we get there? And step one is to realize you don't have to do it yourself. Parts inventory management is definitely a team sport. And so, you know, if you've got other team members to be able to delegate some of these pieces to, by all means, let them take on pieces of this job. And divide that elephant up into smaller pieces. And as Jeremy talked about there on the cycle counts, perhaps we might need to bring in some other departments to help us accomplish our goal. You know, if we need help cycle counting, perhaps we can rent people from the accounting department or from another department to come in and count parts. You know, we may have to coach them a little bit at first to understand pack quantities and things of that nature. But if we can't make our bin locations and our part setup easy enough for somebody from the outside to come in and count parts for us, we might need to simplify our department a little bit more, even for our own employees.
And then step 2 is determining your top priorities. And again, much like Kent just talked about, you know, we just gave you 12 examples of what you should be looking at. And if you were to run all 12 of those and look at all the data, it's a little overwhelming. So it can't all be done at once. We have to establish that right off the bat. When you're starting to do this especially if you're starting this for the first time, if you're taking over a department that maybe hasn't been managed properly, or you were hired to fix something, you can't do it all at once. So we highly suggest that you focus on where you can get the biggest win. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit, but getting that win is very important. And when you do that, it alleviates a lot of that stress and anxiety. So don't do it all at once. Focus on where you can get that big win.
Next one is to define your cadence. And so as we looked at those 12 pieces, a lot of those are going to involve reports out of the DMS. So define how often you're going to be working those reports and cleaning things up. If it's weekly, then be consistent and do it weekly. If it's daily, do it daily. And you're going to work towards managing those exceptions. At some point in time, let's say you've got 103 part numbers on hand without a bin location assigned to them. At some point in time, you're going to get that list of parts cleaned up, and there will be nothing showing there. And you have managed that exception now, and you still have to focus on it going forward, but now you can put your time to other things as well.
And then you need to determine how you're going to measure. So you need to determine what reports in your DMS system will you need to help you with this. What reports can you pull from other sources to help you? And then the big thing is it's important to determine a baseline. So where you're at and where you want to go. So when you're looking at these things, you need to decide what is your threshold. What are you satisfied with? Where do you want to go from where you're at to where you want to get? It's extremely important to set those parameters up before you start going down through the list.
And the last one, and maybe the most important one, you need to be accountable to your team, and they need to be accountable to you. It says, the top point says to share your expectations with them. If we want to start recording lost sales and using that as part of this, they need to know that okay, currently we're not recording any lost sales, and where we want to be is 2 lost sales per counter person per day, perhaps. So share that expectation with them and let them know how we're doing as a department on achieving these goals. Are we winning? Are we losing? And then it's not on this slide, but if there are barriers that exist to achieving some of these results, as the manager, you need to help knock those barriers down. And if it's a DMS problem that one of your people can't get a certain report, then you need to figure out how to help them get that report, whether it's working with IT to get them set up, or giving them access to your login just for that particular report. Knock those barriers down for them. So I believe that covers what we had in mind for today. We'll open it up to any questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to answer them at this point in time. I'm not hearing a lot of questions, Jeremy. So I'll put a question out there to the group, if they can open up their microphones. And my question is, are you still here with us? Did you make it through the webinar today?
Yes.
So we're here. Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
Unfortunately, most of us here from JX, we just met with Jeremy and went through some of these things. So are
okay.
kind of aware of some of our pitfalls and are working on making some adjustments and changes. But
Very
Yeah.
good. All right, Jeremy, anything else from you today?
Yeah, just obviously that, in today's webinar, we only had an hour. And, kind of going through those things, we kept it at a very, very high level. So Ken will bring it up here in just a second or two. It'll be a slide with our email and our contact. There it is. Perfect. That's our emails and our contact. If you have any questions or want to go further in depth or, possibly any information about how to implement these things within your DMS, just reach out to us and let us know. And we'll do our best to get back to you with some answers that'll work for you and your team.
Okay. All right. I see microphones are open. Do we have questions or people wanting to shut down and say goodbye? Either way is fine. So,
Can you hear me?
yes, sir.
Yes.
One thing out of your 12, it's Gord Zabel. One thing out of your 12 that I would add to that is policing that negative on hand. If you go down the road with your DMS with negative on hand, I would police that. That can get kind of messy.
Absolutely, Gord.
Yeah, I
And-
agree with you 100%. One of the main reasons we didn't put it on this particular webinar is there's a good portion of the dealers out there that don't use negative on hand.
Fair
But
enough.
you're absolutely right. It is a massive issue, something you need to keep an eye on, especially we're doing aids and whatnot, and theirs are going negative.
Right. It just it's like all that on hand, no bin. They can really get ahead of you in a hurry.
Yeah,
Yes,
And-
definitely.
there's one DMS in particular that I don't believe they use negative on hand. It's not available as a measure. So that
And
was
that's
another
one-
reason.
That's one way to stop it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for giving up an hour of your day to join us. And as Jeremy said, please feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you might have. And with that, wish you all a happy Wednesday afternoon and a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Well done.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.